Today I'm going to be doing some coding on an application that I built called Twist. Twist is an application I've been working on since about 2010, and I originally started writing it when I got fed up with my old publisher Manning's book review system. Their system had this really clunky SVN integration where you would push up, or whatever the SVN push version is, I think it's commit. You would commit to the SVN repository and then you'd go to their website, and for every single chapter for a book you'd have to scroll down the list of revisions, and at the very bottom you'd have to check a radio button that says latest and then click an update button. And for a book with 15 or 16 chapters, however many it was in the end, it meant a really laborious process for doing this. So I ended up building this system, which you can see over here on the right hand side of the screen, which is it's Twist. And the way this works is that when I'm writing a book, I can push that book's text up to GitHub, and then GitHub sends a post to receive hook, a webhook, to this application. And the application then says, okay, well, there's a new commit. I'm going to pull down all the latest code and I'm going to process all that markdown into all these different HTML elements, and I'm going to save all those to a database. So what we have here is really all this HTML you can see up on the right hand side here. This is generated through Markdown, and Markdown is then converted into HTML, and that HTML is then displayed through React in the end. The front end for this application is a React-based application that uses Apollo. If we look into the React source, which we'll do a little bit later on, we'll see some Apollo queries that then talk to a GraphQL endpoint. That GraphQL endpoint is served by Hanami's router, just Hanami's router, nothing particularly special about that. The Hanami router then passes that off to a GraphQL schema. GraphQL schema has a couple of query endpoints and that sort of thing in it. Just to give you a very brief overview of how this application works. So just to say that again, we have a React front end which has integration with Apollo. Apollo then speaks to a GraphQL endpoint, which is served by Hanami. GraphQL, the queries for that uses ROMs repositories to access that data from the database and pull it out and resolve all those queries. So everything we're seeing here on this page in the front end here, the book information, the chapters information, all I call these elements in Twist. So each of these are these paragraphs and these headings, anything with the notes next to it. Those are called elements. That's all resolved through a big giant GraphQL query for chapters. So just to give an example of what that is, what that might look like, I think it's this one here, chapter query inside a front end. To get all the information for a chapter, we need to build up this really big query. So we need to have okay, what's the title of the book? I don't even know if I need this ID anymore. Probably not, but we'll leave it in there for now. We need the permalink for the book, and this title and permalink is what lets us do this URL up here, right? We need to know the commit information. So maybe when we're viewing a book, we want to see what it looked like at a particular commit, and this part of the query will allow us to do that. If we don't specify a commit here, it's going to use the latest commit, which you can see at the top here is the Rails 6 edition of this book with a commit char of this. So this is probably going to be the latest commit on my local system at the moment. Then we've got the chapter query down here with, again, some commit information. I think don't need this now, but we'll look into that in a moment. We have sections. The sections information populates the sidebar over here. And then we have previous chapter and next chapter. That's this about this book and writing automated tests links. Chapters have footnotes as well. So if we have any footnotes in the chapter, like we have down here for yet Rails has learned some new tricks as well. This 3 here is a footnote, and that appears down the bottom of this chapter, right at the bottom. These footnotes are loaded from this part of the query. And then the major part here is this elements thing, and that's really what I want to look at today. This elements query here, it does really just this notes part here. What happens when we do this query is that for every single element on the page, Twist is going to try and resolve these notes for it, and it's going to try and load up all the notes for the element that exists. Now I don't know if I have an element here with a note on it. Not at the moment, but I'll create one. This is a test note, right? The whole purpose of this application is for users to read the book, and if they have anything that's confusing to them, or they don't understand, or they want some clarification, or they just wanted to say hello, they can leave a note next to it. And then we can go over into the book itself and go notes for this book, and we can see a list of all the notes that users left, along with the element they left the note on, what chapter it was from, what commit, and if we needed to, we could jump to that to see the kind of section, context of where they left that note. So we've got a bunch of information here around notes. Now, this notes thing is what I wanted to look at today, because I think this is a really inefficient part of Twist. What this is doing is for every single element on this page, it's going to do one, not what I wanted to do there. For every single element on this page, it's going to be doing a query to get all the notes for that element. And the main reason it's going to do that is so you can display what notes were previously left for this thing. Now you'll note here, that's a good one, that we are only showing the note if we click and expand it. So really what we want to be doing here is we only want to be doing that notes query if somebody is like expanding this thing, right? If there are any previous notes, then we should do that query to load them up. It really shouldn't be getting that information in the chapter query, and I'll show you why. If we go over into our server over here, let's look at just I've got a bit of code here that is going to show us all the database queries that runs when I load this chapter up. I don't know if you caught that, but look at all this. These are all the queries that get done, that are run when we load up this chapter, right? These are all these book note queries. You'll see that they are selecting book notes, blah, 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 from where an element is this and the state is open. So we only want to see visible notes, or notes that haven't been actioned on an element, right? Those tend to be the most relevant notes to show up. There is a way to see closed notes as well, but right now we just want to see open notes. But this thing's doing like a whole bunch of queries, right? And while the queries are relatively fast, we don't really want, in terms of making the application as performant as it could be, and only doing the bare minimum necessary work to get all the content displayed on the page, really we shouldn't be doing all these queries. The application should not be doing all these queries. The correct place to do this query is when somebody kind of clicks on this thing and expands it open, and then we should show it. Then we should try and do the query to fetch all the notes, right? We shouldn't do it when we're loading the chapter, because we can't just assume already that people are gonna want to see all the notes for all the elements at once. So with that in mind, I'm gonna use Darth. Darth and I are gonna fix this up together. Darth Vader and I'm gonna fix this up together, along with you, of course, if you're watching this. And we're going to reduce these queries. And what we're going to do is this kind of note component here. If we open up the editor here and we go into the console, developer tools, whatever you want to call it here, we find the relevant component. Seems like React Components is not woken up yet. I'm just going to get rid of that footnote up here. That's not going to be correct. With a K on the end. Thank you. All right, let's try again. So we'll click this thing and we'll go to note, and then we'll find this thing. So this notes thing here is a nested component underneath element here. So we have element, bare element. Bare element is just the raw content from the database. This is like a wrapper just around HTML, and it's just literally got we have the book permalink there because sometimes we generate a permalink from that information, but we have the content, and really all it does is just shove out that content to the page. So what we want to do here is we want this notes element to be responsible for loading information about the, we wanted to load those notes for the element. What's really good to note here, what's really good to notice here is that we have this element ID already. And with that, that's the only bit of information we need to do this notes query, right? Because we can see here we're doing a select query, and really the only thing we're looking for is where element ID is this thing. And we already have an element ID. We have it over here, and so we can do that query relatively easily, hopefully. I haven't tried this before. This is all live. This is all, I came up with this idea last night, and I'm just trying to do it now. So let's dig in and we'll have a look. Okay. So what we're looking for here is this element component. Element.tsx is this thing here. We have an element. I'm trying to just keep it all side by side here as well. Let's get that up and running. All right. So inside of inside of this element component, we can see that it's going to be rendering a couple of things. It's going to be rendering like an A tag that lets us jump to a particular element. That's a, if you noticed before when I clicked permalink, it just kind of jumped down to that particular element. I'll see if I can find another one that does it, maybe a little bit further down in our chapter. Let's see. How about this one? There you go. So you can see that it's kind of jumped to the particular element. So this is where Rebecca's left her note, and I can see the element and that sort of thing. So we need an A tag to identify that sort of thing. Next thing up is that notes count. Now the notes count query is relatively quick. It does, a chapter does one query to load all the counts for all the notes across our application. I don't know why the to get the list of all the notes for all the elements query doesn't do the same thing. I'm guessing there's something in the code that does it. Anyway, we're going to ignore that fact. Just assume that it's impossible right now. And what we're looking at is this render notes thing. So this render notes thing here is going to render this notes component. What I like about using TypeScript and that sort of thing here, and just using VS Code, is I can command click on this thing. What was that? Keystroke Pro. That's going to show up. So this is going to show up, hopefully. Let's have a look. Let's turn it on. Yeah. So if I do like command or any sort of keystrokes, you'll see that pop up in the top right hand corner now. Anyway, this notes component here is what's going to be rendering all these notes. So this form that pops up underneath, you can see this is the form component here, and this render notes is kind of what we're interested in. This component at the moment is not doing any sort of Apollo query to load these notes. So it's not doing any sort of GraphQL query. It's relying on that information to be passed in from the props, from the parent element above it. So what we want to do here is change this component, first of all, to change this component to only load the notes when the component is rendered. And the component is only rendered when we pop it open like this. So that's the component is hidden and then shown this way. I think so. You can see that right now the note component doesn't appear here at the moment, and when we pop this open, then it appears underneath. So it's not present on the page and just hidden with some sort of CSS. It's actually not rendered by React until we click that notes button. So we can be confident here that kind of like a component did mount call or some sort of wrapper around this. I think a wrapper might be a better way of doing this. On this component would be probably the right way of doing it. All right, so let's look at how chapter is doing. You might see at the top there, Command T is my file browser. I think VS Code's default shortcut is Command P. I think that's two-handed and it's a bit of a stretch, so I'd use Command T. It's also used, I think, in Sublime Text and maybe some other applications, but Command T is one-handed, so that's what I'm going to be using to open up these files here. So let's look at how chapter does it first of all. I think chapter does this in like a wrapped chapter. What's this render chapter function? That's not doing anything. Go away. Legacy code isn't it great? So wrap chapter here is getting these perhaps some props that it passed down from its parent component. And it does this query wrapper thing. Now, query wrapper is this component that I built. If I can open it up here. And what it does is it tries to do a query, and then if it's loading, it just shows, hey, loading. If there's an error, there's an error. Otherwise, it's going to render the children component. So this is just to wrap around some Apollo stuff. And yeah, it's not the latest and greatest Apollo stuff. There's like React hooks and that sort of thing that Apollo is now favoring using. But this is a legacy code base, and you have to deal with the what's the rule? Like the standard of the code base. The rules that you follow in a code base are what the code base is right now, and it's better to adapt to that standard than it is to evolve to try and introduce new stuff, because then what you end up doing is is like having all these archaeological layers, and there's no one right way of doing things. If we just adapt to the standard that was there originally, it would be better, and everything would behave the same way. And really, there's no downside of doing this as far as I can tell. So what we're going to do here is we just want this wrapped chapter. We're going to steal this wrapped chapter thing, and I'm going to chuck it down the bottom here of the notes component. Now this is going to crack it because there is no wrapped chapter props thing coming through. Really what we want to do is this notes property thing. I think we want notes props to come down here. So I'm just going to change this to notes props, since that seems to be what the editor is complaining about first. It's going to be complaining about a bunch of different things. So let's just do wrapped notes here. And what we're going to do is export this wrapped notes. Okay. Now the variables that we're getting through, we are getting through book permalink. I don't necessarily think that that's particularly useful right now. So we'll just get that element ID out of there, and we want to do not a chapter query, we want to do like a notes query, and I'll define that in a second. That's going to be a variable thing that we import at the top of the file. So if we look back to chapter, there was this chapter query thing we imported, and we saw that like very early on, where we were importing this big long GraphQL tag query thing. And now we want to do the same sort of thing in notes, but let's just tidy this thing up first before we move on. So do element ID here, and so we got a notes query here. We're going to get some data back, and then when we get that data back, it's not going to be a book that we're rendering. It's just going to be some notes that are coming out of that. I'm not quite sure what that's going to look like right now, but let's say it's going to look a bit like, let's see what this component's taking. This component's taking in a bunch of notes. I think so. That means then we're probably going to get something that's like a, you know what, this wrapped notes thing. I reckon we could define another interface for, because I think that's only going to get wrapped notes props. That's only going to get through an element ID. Really, that's all that component needs. Whereas the other one is saying like it needs what is it? It needs a book permalink, notes, and notes submitted, and element ID. We aren't getting any of that through. Although notes submitted here is this function this kind of callback function when notes are submitted. I think wrap notes props is probably going to get that too, and then send that down through the chain. So let's do this. We'll do notes, and right here we'll do notes submitted. And we'll extract that out, notes submitted. We'll destructure that from the props, so we'll do notes submitted here. Yes, forgive me, Father, I'm still using class-based components. That's just what I do in this application. Again, the standard is what I just accept. So we're going to import query wrapper here from, I'm not sure where it comes from. One more layer up from there, I think, yeah. Import query wrapper. So now we're going to get this query wrapper thing. Now we don't have notes. I don't know what this is complaining about. All right, we're not passing in those extra attributes. So we're not passing in. This needs book permalink, and it needs notes, and it needs an element ID. So you can pass all that stuff through too. Let's see. We get a book ID out of book permalink out of this. So book permalink string, and the other thing was the array of notes. Okay, so we want to do book permalink here, and pass that along, and do element ID and pass that along too, right? Because this is what our unwrapped notes needs. This kind of nested component needs. The other thing it needs is this notes thing. It's not getting any notes at the moment because we don't know what that data is going to be. For the time being, I'm just going to return an empty array here because I just don't know what the structure is coming back from this data thing. I don't know what that looks like right now. So this is now complaining property notes does not exist on wrapped notes. Well, okay. I think this is to do with how we're rendering this wrapped. When we're doing render notes here over in the element, passing into this .state.notes, but really we don't have any notes at the moment that are going to be coming through here. So we'll just get rid of this here. We're not going to be passing in any more notes because it just doesn't. This notes element doesn't have that. I noticed that we By the way, this was using this.state.notes, and I was looking up here and I could see notes submitted, and this seems to like update the list of notes that an element has. So we might have to track that on the notes element itself and say, hey, these are the notes. When a note is submitted, then yeah, somehow we've got to get that form. Where is it? This form here to update the state of this notes component, and then it keeps a track of that. What I like about that is that it's going to wrap all the like note logic in this notes class, and notes is then going to have all the context of notes, right? It's this element thing knows about notes, and that's kind of violating something like a single responsibility principle. So we could then get rid of probably get rid of notes submitted here. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's just try and get this query happening first of all. So we need that query to come back. Now I like borrowing code from other places because I periodically review this code and I get kind of lost a little bit. So all we'll do here is we're going to import a note query, and we'll do from note query, right? And we'll just do really it's like notes query, I guess. And I prefer using like lowercase to indicate that this is it's going to be treated like a variable, not like a class or a thing like that. And I use a file name ending in query, so it can be differentiated from like this form is a component, and you can see submit note mutation here. You know, based on the file name, that's probably going to have some GraphQL code in it. Oh, look, it does. Great. So notes query over here. Let's build that notes query.tsx. Chuck some stuff in here. Now, what do we need for a note? Well, that's a good question. Not entirely sure. Let's just see if we can do this. And notes query is just going to be the name of the query that we get. We know that we're going to have an element ID at least coming through. I don't think we need anything else. Now, there was that note fragment thing that we could probably borrow. So let's just chuck this over here, and we want to kind of do, what's the syntax that I'm missing out? I can't remember anymore. This thing. Yeah, I thought that's what I was doing. Okay, well, node fragment. So node fragment here, it's going to be complaining because we are not that directory, it's the directory above that. It's notes fragment. So this is notes inside of chapter, but we want to go right up to the top. We want to go right up to notes down here, which is the same level of chapter. So we want to go up 1, 2, and then we're 1, 2 to book into the source directory, and then down to notes, right? So the thing we want to get out here is that list of notes. The note fragment here defines a GraphQL fragment called note. A way we can use that is we can just do ... note, and then we have the right syntax here. I'm not sure what this is complaining about down here. Let me end it there. Come on, computer, you know what I mean. Just do it. All right, so we're getting this kind of query now, and we should be getting back a bunch of information about our note. What's gonna suck here is that when we open this thing up, it's gonna crash. I did not expect that. Type name is missing from. Okay, that's a different. I'm not sure what's going on there, but we'll come back around to that, I think. What's this complaining about? Can't find module notes query. Well, I think you're lying because it's in the same directory. Come on, VS Code. It's there, babe. It's there. I don't know what you're complaining about. Okay. So we're getting back some data here. Not sure what that data looks like. Well, what would be a good way to check it out is in looking into this note fragment thing. So the note fragment here returns this. I think that error we were seeing before is because we're not returning a type name for this. Nope. Okay. Well, it's a different error. Cannot match fragment because type name property is missing in current user. Okay. So what I'm happy about, I think it's this thing down here. User GraphQL or Apollo needs to know the type name of things. Okay. You're still complaining about it. Well, that's fascinating. All right. Well, let's dig into this too. Oh, it might be down here too, right? Because you got users here too. I don't know why this needs it. Still crashing. See, this is the thing about live coding, is that you're going to run into all sorts of demigod type stuff where the demigods are going to be like, hey, nice recording you've got going on here. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. We have a GraphQL query coming through here that looks like it's for the chapter query. Do we have a note query as well? Not yet. All right, let's have a look deeper into this. I'm just going to move this over here away from my face so I can see it. So it cannot match fragment because type name property is missing on current user. So this is the current user query, and it looks like, I wonder where that's coming from. That's completely different of what we're doing at the moment. So this is occurring here. Above error occurred on the query component. Well, what above error you mean? Come on. Well, this is saying that root query current user book permalink type name book. Fascinating. I actually don't know. So query wrapper on notes here. Let's just see if it's getting back some data, right? If we can see that it's getting anything back, maybe it's just the data that we're doing here. It seems to be happening really quickly right after we click that, and nothing at the moment. Okay, so cannot match fragment because type name is missing on current user. Well, it seems to be pointing to this current user thing. That's something we haven't really checked out or looked at. I mean, it's this right here. I don't know why that would need type name coming through, but sure, whatever. It doesn't seem to be that causing it at all. Right, saying root query current user type name property cannot match fragment. Okay, so see, even somebody who is like a senior programmer. I mean, I'm only 32. I don't consider myself to be senior. Even somebody who's supposed to be, writing books and teaching people, I still make mistakes and I still have to Google stuff. Data you're writing is missing this stuff, change it to this. I'm not writing any data using fragments. What is going on here? Okay. Well, really, this only happened when we added that code to notes. So let's backtrack a bit and we'll see what this notes query thing is doing. Maybe we can cut a bit of it out, right? Maybe we could cut like, let's have a look at notes query. So let's say we're not going to get, I reckon I know what's happening here. So this query is only getting, this query is not doing anything. It needs to actually use the element ID. I think that's what I'm doing wrong here, is the element ID. This query is formatted incorrectly. So GraphQL Playground will help us decipher this thing. The URL endpoint is going to be localhost 9292 since I'm just using the rack as a host for this application. I don't know why it said that. HTTP localhost 9292 and GraphQL. Okay, that seems fine. So really, the query we're doing here is this thing. Now it doesn't know what this notes thing is at the moment because we don't have one of those queries. Perhaps in this query we could pass in that book permalink, right? Let's have a look. So if we did this as well, if we passed in book permalink up the top here, what this would allow us to do is to say for this particular book, so the permalink we want to pass in is going to be book permalink, right? And then that allows us to scope this notes query. So it'll allow us to find particular notes for a particular book and a particular element within that book. There might be too many brackets here. Let's have a look. Bracket ends there. No, missing one extra bracket here. Okay. So we've got, this should, it's going to crack it some more. That's a technical term. Anyway, I'm very confused. This should be getting me back some data. What is going on with this computer today? It's just not loving life. probably because I'm not passing in an element ID. So let's do that. What did we have? I'll just steal one from here. Okay, so we've got, that needs to be a string, and then the book permalink is Rails book. Okay. Bit precious about the stuff. That is so strange that it's not working here at the moment. I mean, I'm hitting play and it's not coming up with anything. So what I'm going to do here is just going to steal this and put it back over here in our code. Maybe this will work better. So the error that we were getting before is that we weren't really querying for a particular field. I'll leave that node fragment thing in there. We weren't really querying in GraphQL. You really need to query for these fields, and I wasn't doing that. I was just like, hey, get me a node fragment, boom, straight up. But what we need to do is getting a book's permalink, getting some book information, querying for that book field, and then any notes inside of that. So what this is going to return is its book top level element, and inside of that is going to be this notes element. Why we're doing that is because it allows us to scope that query down, so we can get notes for a particular element within a particular book. Just helpful for querying reasons. It also helps build us our endpoint on the other end. Now I realize that this query looks to be missing an extra bracket there for the book. So let's count them. We got notes query 1, book 2, notes 3. Okay. So it looks like we've got the right number of brackets there. Let's just jump back into that browser and we'll have a look at what's going on here now. All right. So looks like that's working now, but we can see this field notes doesn't exist on type book. Now, a variable element is declared by notes query but not used by GraphQL. Fragment note was defined but not used. Wow, it is unhappy. Now, this field notes doesn't exist on the type of book. Well, that is defined. I'm just going to close this GraphQL playground and move the browser back over there. Okay. We kind of defined the front end aspect of it now. Now we need to dive back down into the back end. So we've got this notes query that's going to hit our GraphQL endpoint. And by the way, I'll show you where that is. That's in defined here in the router. This is just a Hanami router. Looks almost like a Rails router. When a GraphQL query is done, it goes to this controller's GraphQL run class. So if you look at GraphQL run.rb, really this is just a wrapper around web GraphQL runner, and runner is the thing that actually does the query using this schema, GraphQL schema execute method from the GraphQL gem. That's a lot to take in. Really, the GraphQL gem is really well organized, and this code, we inherit from GraphQL schema using the schema, the GraphQL gem. The schema object defines a query type and a mutation type, and on query type, thank you, we have this field called book. So we have that initial thing. We can get, when we're building queries, if I load up that, the playground again. What's this gonna do? HTTP localhost 9292 GraphQL, that's right. So I can do a query here, and I can query for book information. And when I'm doing this field, I need to pass in an argument called a permalink. So I need to say, like, this is the permalink for the book, and I want to get information about the Rails book. Inside a book, I want to get things like the title and the permalink if I wanted to, and hit play, and it will not do. Oh, it did the thing now. So this is the shape of data that we're going to get back. We're going to get back to this data thing, and then inside of that, we're going to get book, and inside book, we're going to get title and permalink, because that's all we've asked for. There's more information inside a book. In fact, if you click on this book type thing, we can see that we can get back a blurb and this thing called the default branch and latest commit and whatever else. So if we wanted to do that, I'll show you an example. Latest commit, and you get shard that latest commit, and there you go. GraphQL is really good. You just kind of build up queries to get the data that you want, and it doesn't, like a regular JSON endpoint, won't just splat everything that it knows about. It's great if you only want very small amounts of data. If you just want to pick and choose the data that you want. Okay, so really what we're trying to do here is we've got this book query, and inside that we want to do this notes thing. And inside of notes thing, we want to specify a particular element's ID and just steal another one from over here somewhere. Sure, why not that one? That's great. It's a good number. And then we want to get the information out of a note. So it's kind of like this, and this is now the same error that we were seeing inside of our browser here. Field notes does not exist on type book GraphQL error. Okay, so we've got this field notes does not exist on type book, the same sort of error. Now we've got this query here, and we've got a way to reproduce it both in this GraphQL playground and inside of our front end. But what I'm trying to do in this application is every time I have a really important query, I think this is a really important query, I try and write a test for it. So we can write a test for it over in, if we go into the back end here, inside Twist Web GraphQL queries, we have a bunch of queries already. Now I want to do another one here called NoteSpec RB. This query is kind of just trying to see if I can write something real quick about this. There's quite a lot of code in here. You know what? That's probably going to take a bit of time. Let's maybe not go down that path just yet. I'll just show you the adding the notes thing here. I'll write a test for it later. I promise. What's the Scouts on a thing? Anyway, we wanted to find this field. So the way we do that is with the notes thing, and what we're going to be returning here is an array of these note types out of it. And we just say like, I think you have to say, I'm not sure if you need to do that null falsing an array thing. So we're going to define a field called notes, and this field takes an argument, and that argument is of an element ID. That's going to be a string, and it can be definitely required. Let's complaining about blank spacing. Okay, so when we define a field on this thing, we should now get back. That's probably going to crash the. I need to have to restart the server. See, because this is an Rails application, it doesn't automatically reload the code. Oh no, how dare it. So every time we change some GraphQL code, we have to kind of restart the server a bit. Which is, I guess, like an advantage to writing tests, right? You have that. Okay, missing keyword argument now. Writing tests is that you can rerun the test and then you don't have to restart the server all the time, but that's okay. So apparently we do need that null keyword here, null false. We don't want anything in this query to be false. This overmind thing that I'm using is like a Foreman alternative. I really like it. Seems to be working quite well for my intents and purposes at the moment. Okay, so we'll jump back into that GraphQL query thing and just try and do a query. Looks like it's cracked it again. Okay, so this is saying failed to implement book notes. Tried doing book type notes, doesn't exist. Twist book notes doesn't exist. So it's looking at that like a model instance, I guess you could call it. I call them entities in my application. Same sort of thing. I call them entities because model is really an overloaded term, and if people were working in this application thinking that there were models, they might think that you can do database queries on it. But models in this application, you can't do database queries. The database queries are handled by repository classes and relations, which we'll see in a little bit, I reckon. So really what this is saying is that like it can't find a method called notes. Okay, fair enough. You'll notice for like these other fields, latest commit, default branch, and commit, and that sort of thing, we have these methods defined underneath here. These are, I think the GraphQL gem refers to these as resolvers. So when you ask for a field in GraphQL, you need some way of like resolving the information for that, you know. So really, this is not in any particular order. I'm just going to check this up the top here for trying to keep that code close to each other. So if you're watching this, you can kind of see what I'm doing here. So the element ID here is just going to come through. It's going to be a string, and it's required. So I can just say it's a keyword argument, right? That argument's going to come through. Now what I want to do here is I want to get like all the notes for the book for a particular element. So what I want to do here is I want to look up in the note repository and get out the, I'm not sure what the note repository has in terms of abilities to do queries. So let's just look at that note repo. That note repo is over here in this class. So looks pretty bare bones at the moment. Hey, Looks like we don't have anything in particular that will let us get out note information there. Maybe it's the book note repository I'm thinking of. Yeah, it is here. So this book note repository, there's like two tables for tracking notes. There's a notes table and then there's a book notes table. The book notes table kind of is I think it's a view actually. It joins together books and notes. So if you wanted to find notes for a particular book, you wouldn't have to go down that hierarchy of books, chapters, elements, notes. Sorry, I missed a thing. It's books, commits, chapters, elements, notes. You can just go books, notes in the book notes repository, and that's what this is going to be doing. So when we do book notes here, it's going to be querying that book notes table and not going to be trying to like go down all that massive hierarchy and joining together a whole bunch of different related tables. So anyway, really what we're looking at here is we kind of want to combine almost these two things, right? We want to say like, we want to get like this by book thing and the element query. It's kind of like a join, not a join, a combination of those two things. So we'll do book notes repository here. We kind of want to get that by book. Well, let's say by book and element. Okay, by book and element. Now to get out the book's ID, the way we do that is with just object in GraphQL. Because we're over here at book type is a class that is resolved for every single book. When we do a book query, these are the fields that we can get for a particular book. So we can get a book's ID, a book's title, a book's blurb, a book's permalink. And if we're in a resolver in that class, we can always just use object to refer to the current object. You can think of it like self almost, like it's the current book that we're working with. Object ID is the thing we want. And the other part we want to pass to this query is going to be a element ID. So we want to do by book and element, passing in the object ID and passing in the element ID here at the end. This is saying only use lowercase snake case for, okay, this is going to be a bit precious about it. See, this thing says element ID. I don't know, Rubocop. I think you're wrong, Rubocop. Be quiet. I think element ID is the right thing. Is there another example of this somewhere else? I don't know. No type state. Nope. I can't find one quickly, so I'm just going to say Rubocop is wrong and move on. Anyway, we've got this book note repo thing, and we've got this method called by book and element. I'm going to try and do this query where we're going to find a book notes for a particular book and for a particular element. Now, book note repo here doesn't contain a method that's like by book and element. So, and I think what we want to do here is almost like a see, some of this stuff here is using like state as well. By book and state is sort of like what we want to do. I think for this we really just want to keep a track of the open notes on the elements. So we might just default this query to using open notes. So a couple of things. So by book and element, book ID and element ID, the two things we get through. Because we've got this by book query here that just is doing a straight up query, we can just do that. By book, book ID. There we go. You got that for free. That's good. Next thing we need to do is an element ID on the end. So that's a good thought. Is I don't know if this book notes table contains an element ID field. I was treating this, I was thinking about this as like the notes table in our system. Let's have a look at Postico. Postico is what I use for accessing a database. The particular database I'm looking at is books development. So these are all the different tables of our applications here. You've got books. Books have branches. Branches have commits. Commits have chapters. Chapters have elements. Elements have notes. Notes have comments. So you can see that this is a massive hierarchy of data. Users are somewhere in there. Footnotes and images are somewhere in there too, but we don't really care about that. What we're looking at here is this book notes chapter, book notes table. And thankfully, this thing, whoever designed this database must have been a pure genius. Just kidding. I'm just being a little bit egotistical there. but there is an element ID field, so that's awesome. We can do this. So we've got, you can see we've got the book ID there. Of course, we've already got queries already doing a query for book ID, so I'm guessing that's already there. But element ID is another thing that we're gonna pass through. That's really good that it's there. I was concerned that we might have to do some database changes, and that would take a really long time. But we've got this here now. This is great. So what we'll do here is we'll do a where query for element ID, and I wanted to also do just find me the ones that are open at the moment, because this really, as I was saying before, this should only be showing the currently open notes on a book. If notes have been closed, typically those issues have been dealt with, or they're not considered relevant, I guess. You can always dig back in the history and find where they exist. Anyway, we've got by book and element here, and we've got by book and element over here as well. So we've got by book element passing an element ID. Rubacop is having a conniption about it. I think element ID is going to be the thing. We'll see if this is actually going to be element underscore ID. Ruby will show us that the keyword argument being passed there is not element ID. It's going to be element underscore ID. But we will deal with that when it comes up. So I just want to restart that server one more time, and we're just going to try and do that query. Uh-oh, what happened? Oh no, it is up. Okay. You notice there that we're still doing all these book note queries. We're going to get rid of them very soon. But for now, what we're going to kind of do is look at trying to load up these notes things, right? So we're getting through this thing with book permalink of type string was provided invalid value. Well, maybe we're not passing through that book permalink thing, right? Back in our notes index over here, we have this query that we're doing where we're just passing in this element ID, but we're not really passing in book permalink. So we kind of want to pass in book permalink too. And that should be okay. This is the front end code, so we shouldn't have to reload anything in particular. And now this is crashed somehow. Then the server appears to have crashed somehow. So move you down a bit. Too far. There you go. Yeah, server has crashed. So let's jump over here and we'll have a look at what this has done. Here's a big long Ruby stack trace. Scroll. Missing keyword, element ID. Maybe Rubacop is right. Let's appease Rubacop and we'll see what this is going to do now. So we'll just restart that server one more time, and I reckon it's right. I reckon the GraphQL gem is clever enough to kind of underscore things and make it look more like Ruby code than JavaScript code. In JavaScript code we would write element ID or even element ID with a capital D, but in Ruby you do element underscore ID, right? I think GraphQL gem is clever enough to do that sort of thing. All right, so we're still seeing network error. Let's double check what's going on with that server. See, if you wrote a test, we wouldn't see this massive stack trace and have to scroll through it. All right, so we're getting this undefined method created out for hash, and this is a note, some sort of note element that's coming back. So looks like GraphQL is resolving our notes, but the thing that's getting back is this big long something out of it. Not entirely sure what it's getting out. You know what I'm going to do here is just notes and p notes here and then just notes again. If this was Elixir, there'd be a better way of doing it, but restart. I should have just used those overmind restart server, but that's okay. All right, we'll do another, just stop that, clear that out. Okay, let's try again. So the thing we're going to get back from here is we should see this thing. This is the relation we're going to be getting back. It's strange that we're getting back a, oh, by the way, this thing should be returning an array to a. Repositories should be returning arrays as much as possible. Otherwise, if we don't return an array here on a ROM repository, this is a ROM repository class, what it'll allow us to do in classes that use it, like book here, is we could perform extra queries on our database. And really, that's not best practice here. Every query that's happening on our database should either be in this repository class or it should be over here in these relation classes. ROM provides these two classes that kind of encapsulate all our I don't know if I've got anything in here. Here's one, for example. Here's a more complicated query that gets used. Anyway, repositories and relations are where we should put queries. If we find ourselves like doing wheres or joins inside of these resolvers, that's probably overstepping the line, and really we should move that stuff back down into repositories and relations, right? So we've got kind of the resolver up here, and then the repo down here, and then the relation, and then underneath the relation we've got the database finally. And if we're doing queries right up at the top level here in GraphQL, that's a bad practice. We should probably move them down into those repos and relations. So anyway, we're getting back this notes thing. Let's double check what we're seeing here. So we'll do overmind restart server again, and we will see what's happening over here. Wow, that's a lot of information. I'm gonna ignore that and just look in the terminal here. We get back this book note thing, and it seems to like it's an object. So what is this thing complaining about? Maybe it's that we're returning note type, and these things are not note types, they are book notes. Instead, it shouldn't particularly matter. Okay, created at there. We have a created at, All right, this thing was crashing. Oh, error writing. This looks like a different error. Ooh. Error writing because why? Is there a console error? No, just here. Yeah. Okay. Store error. The application attempted to write an object with no provided ID, but the store already contains an ID of book 3 for this object. That's why I'm returning IDs and queries. Is because Apollo needs it. So Apollo uniquely identifies elements based on their ID. So I need to provide an ID for the book when I'm fetching it for this particular query. And there you go. Now it's loading that information, or at least it's no longer crashing the application. Our front end here is not displaying any notes because we're still returning this notes thing here as just an empty array. We still don't know what the shape of this data looks like. My guess is like it's a, oh, you know what we can do is we can go over here into this, hopefully we can do something like this now. Yeah, we can. Cool. So note ID here, and we can say something maybe like an element information, get some element in ID out of that. We can have like some content for that element. Here you go. So the shape of the data is going to be like this sort of thing. Maybe we don't want element, maybe we want user instead. We want their email address and maybe their name and stuff like this. Oh, I'm showing other people's emails. Let's not do that. Hey. Okay, so we've got information for users here. So we gotta get that information that we want to display for that note coming back out, which is good. So the shape of the data is going to be this data book notes thing. We want this notes thing right at the right down in this data here. I just want to see what this data object does look like. I'm guessing I'm right that it's going to be like data book notes, but let's just double check. So you can see there's nothing in the console log already. So nothing has done this data query yet until we click this, and now we're going to get this thing out. It's missing that data top level element. I'm guessing Apollo strips that out, but we've got book and notes, and we just want to get this notes thing out from it. Okay. So the way we do that is we get notes like we want to do book and notes, and then this is going to be data, and now we're going to get these notes out of it. So we've got these notes coming through successfully now. Hopefully, this will scroll, pop this open, and then we've got this note coming through. See, there's 2 notes on this element, so I could leave a comment on this note, and I can leave a comment on that note. So we've got that information coming through now. And that query is only happening, that query to load all the notes is only happening when I click this thing. Before that, well, actually I think the chapter's still doing all those queries, right? Yeah, the chapter is still doing all these queries. So really it doesn't need to do those queries anymore. Let's, we're almost done here. Chapter query, we'll get rid of this notes thing here. This doesn't need to do this anymore. So elements don't need to, we can even get rid of note fragment here, look. I love this when we can tidy up some code and remove some stuff. Just really clean things up a bit. All right, so we refresh this page, and what this is now doing, look, there's just so many fewer queries. We removed like 5 lines of code, and it's really tidied things up. So as it was 5 lines of code. So just to contrast and compare, look at the scroll bar on this thing. It's huge. And there's just so many. This is only like a baby chapter. If you look at something, let's go back to like one of the big chapters of the book. Look at this scroll bar. Look how big this chapter is, right? This chapter is so long, and not only that, but you can see that this thing is like hammering the database and getting all these queries. Like it's getting all these book note queries here. This is just not on. This is, in a production system, probably not great for the database. You have your ops people going like, hey, can you not hit the database so much? So what we're going to be doing now is that look, that scroll bar is massively reduced, and there's still this big query here to get all the, I think that's the count for all the elements in the page. Yeah, it looks to be the right one. But there aren't all these queries to get all the notes. Now, when I do click this notes thing, then you'll see this query coming up now, which is this query here. So there's firstly a query to get that book information again. We need to do that in order to get the book's ID out. I mean, we could probably do some sort of like, I don't know, if there's a book permalink on that. Let's have a look one more time in poster code. Unfortunately, not on the book notes table. If there was a permalink here, we could, instead of book ID, we could look up the book notes directly based on the book ID and the element ID. But currently we don't have that. So we need a way of like, no thank you poster code, not yet, soon. We need some way of like converting that permalink over into an ID, and we could do that with a subquery. We could be like, select all these things, and then where the permalink is that. So like select book notes where book ID, and then a subquery here to find the ID. But these queries are relatively cheap. Like look at that. Like what's that? Like 5/1000ths of a tens, hundreds, thousands, 5/10,000ths of a second. I think that is. That's a really cheap query, and it's only one for every time you load up those elements. So I think it's okay. Let's just jump back over here where we know we have some notes. So we can see that it's only coming up once as well. So that query, once we've loaded that data, it doesn't have to load it again, which is really, really helpful. I'm not sure why QuickTime is doing its thing over here. That's oh well, that's okay. We got to the end anyway. QuickTime, what are you doing? It's okay. So we get to the end of this. So we're kind of just cleaning up some code now. What we kind of want to make sure is happening is that when we leave an extra note on this thing, that the notes change, right? We want to make sure. So this is kind of like the second part. This form here. I was talking like the. Let's have a look. Element.tsx. This node submitted stuff here is inside of element, and I reckon you could probably move that out to like keeping a track of the notes. The note count is next to the element, right? This is we've got this note count right next to the bare element, so we need some way of like reporting back the note count is, hey, you need to increment the note count. That's something we need to do here. But I think this note stuff could be tracked inside of that notes component. So just this is a final thing here. I'll show you what I mean. So if I'm going to leave an extra note on this element, just type something here and hit submit, you'll see that this note count thing didn't change, and the note that I left doesn't appear. So there's something going on here. I just want to make sure there's yeah, look, that callback is not even happy as well. So when we submitted that note, it's not coming through successfully, but it did go through to the back end. So what I want it to do is that if you leave a note, we don't have to refresh the page to see that note appearing, right? You shouldn't have to do that. So just as one final thing here, I'm just trying to get QuickTime to cooperate and get rid of that timer thing. QuickTime, what are you doing? I don't know what you're doing, QuickTime. Yeah, that again. There you go. Yeah. Really, QuickTime? Really? Okay. Much better. Okay. So this note submitted thing, we do just want to increment the note count. We don't care about the notes itself. We do want to toggle the form, I'm guessing. Although the toggle form could probably be on that notes. Not well. Toggle form needs to happen because we need to have a. Yeah, we kind of want to have that notes here. And really it's like toggle notes instead, so we're just going to rename that to toggle notes. Show notes. Show notes, and change this to show notes, and up here is show notes. Oh, everything's breaking, show notes. And one more thing is show notes up here, show notes. Okay, everything should be okay, and this should be show notes. Yeah. This .toggle form doesn't exist because it's now toggle notes. All right. So this element now no longer knows about notes. I don't think it knows about it there. It doesn't. It shouldn't get them from the parent component. So the parent component of this is a chapter. If we go over in a chapter here, we'll see elements down here. This was getting through. It was getting notes through in these element props, but element props no longer is going to be defining notes. So if we've got an element props thing, this has bare element props, which had notes coming through in it before. It's not going to have that anymore, so we'll just ditch that. Notes does not exist. Okay, this is happening on. I've got some storybook stuff here. Storybook is just a way of like I can see what components look like in my application. Now, I won't go into it at the moment. Might be another live streaming adventure later on. And this is now failing in chapters show stories. Why? Yeah, I just fixed all that up. Okay, let's try overmind our client. That's better. All right. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to get this notes thing to show up properly when we render these notes. So render notes is going to render the notes component, and then this thing is what not that thing. This notes thing here is what we want to keep track of the current notes in the element. So this notes prop thing is going to get through some notes, and then we want to update that. So notes notes state we'll call this. And this thing is just going to have a, seriously, this thing is still complaining about notes query. I don't know why it's happening. Notes state. And we'll do notes, and that's going to be an array of note types. Like that, you can see it up here as well. Note props gets this notes thing in. And it's just going to be the same sort of object. And we're just going to say, like, this is the current, when we get in some, when we load this component up, the state of this is going to be the props of this.props.notes. When we load this component up. Now, this is the form. When we submit that note, note submitted is going to be that property that gets passed down. We saw it here. Now, that note submitted, we kind of want to make sure that the current list of notes are updated. So, note submitted, you know what, I reckon we'll just extract that out. So we'll do this note submitted and call it like this. Note submitted, boom. We don't have a function called note submitted, we'll build one. Note submitted. Now this needs to be an arrow function because we're going to be referring to the state of the element. The argument this gets is a note type. It's a ridiculous class name, a ridiculous type name, because we've got a component called note. So I've had to call this type. You can see it's type note type. Sounds like blah 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 from Arrested Development. But note submitted. Why am I calling the function there? I'm being a goose. Note submitted gets a note. Now from this we need to do this.props.note submitted so we can get that callback back out to element. And this, what this is going to be doing is just like hiding that form. I guess, do we want to do that? Yeah, maybe. You might want to hide that form just to get it out of the way and then increment that note count. So that's fine. Now this thing is not going to take any argument now, I just realized. So we can get rid of that note element if we don't need that, but we still need the still need it to be an arrow function because you can see it's updating the state here, right? So it's wrong. This note submitted now doesn't take an argument, so we get rid of it out of the type definition here. We still want to call that note function here, and what we want to do here with this note object, what's this saying? Oh, I need to get rid of it out of here too. So we need to say note submitted. There you go. That's fine too. So note, what we need to do with this notes thing is we want to get the notes from the state. So we want to say like const notes, this.state.notes, and then notes concat current note, and then this dot state, this dot set state, and say we're setting notes to notes. So we are updating the element with the latest information of notes. So hopefully now we should see two things. We should see the note count increasing, and we should see the note itself without having to refresh the page. So yes, we see the note count refreshing, but we don't see that note. That's certainly interesting. Well, we're setting that state. I think what's happening is we're not. Yeah, this notes thing's reading it from the prop, so it's only going to get the initial version of the note. So the notes here need to come out from state. That's what I'm doing wrong. This dot state. Okay, so we've got state. Let's try again. One final test. Ideally, you'd write some tests for this sort of thing, but this is a #yellow application. Yeah, that's strange. So notes. Let's have a look. Let's see what notes are after this point. I want to make sure they are actually valid. So, you know what? I'm just going to close a couple of these to hide them away. Refresh that page. Now there's no notes in that element. We should see this. Okay. We still don't see that note there. I think I'm just being a silly ducker about this. I probably meant to do something like that, where you're concatenating. JavaScript still confuses me. I am entirely confused by JavaScript a lot of the time. So we've got 3 notes there. It was still not appearing on the page. That's okay. Let's do another console log of notes. I reckon this note submitted. You know what? This is not getting in. This is not getting in a thing that we're actually submitting. I don't think. Let's just see what form's doing. Form is submit note. Note submitted, and here we do. Okay, it should be coming through as the right data. Fine. Oh, did I make that a bit smaller? Did I? Let's close a couple of these things down again. All right. So we're trying to need one more note. And we get back 4. Oh, it's got a type name on it. Cool. All right. 4 notes. We see 1, 2, 3, and not one more. Okay, so we're setting this .state notes to be correct. Let's just double check what we're doing. So we've got notes coming through here. We should see 4 notes. So we see notes length here. So this time we only have 1 note on this element, right? And if we do a submission, it should be 2. So there are now 2 notes, but there's only 1 being displayed here. So I'm not sure. Notes length to map through them all. Ah, it says 1 again. Why? Was that when I reloaded it? No. Let's try that again. So we got 2, okay. And then we type 3. Pop it open, 2. Is that the query happening? I'm not entirely sure. That's very strange. I wonder what's happening. That's not good. If I reckon if this query was happening again, it would be loading. You would see it. Yeah, I don't know what's happening here. That's very, very strange. Render pops it open. Renders notes. That's okay. We've got notes at the top. I'm not sure. Submit note 4. Alright, think about it. So if we have wrap notes, that should be doing a query wrapper and then returning some information about notes. So I want to see if this is like getting back let's see the data this is returning. If it's loading it twice, then it should pop it up here, right? So we should see it twice. This thing's going to be loading some data every time we close a note in this thing. That's good to know. All right, so we pop it open. It's loaded that query, and it's done it again now. So it's tried to do a query to get the notes. And I reckon what's happening here is that Apollo is caching this particular query. I think that query wrapper is going, well, hey, you already did that query. I know for a fact that thing returned empty notes to start off with. So let's have a look at what we can do to turn off fetch policy. Fetch policy no cache. So we can do fetch policy on this thing. That's right. Query wrapper fetch. No, come on. Just fetch policy. Okay. So fetch policy is no cache. And that should fix our problem. So we should see no notes here, type, 2 notes, and now we should see that's my newest note. And we should see newest note here. The note count's wrong, but we can fix that up later. All right, so we can see the newest note appearing. I think that's okay for now. I'm okay with the note count changing. So we've got 2 currently open notes here. We leave an additional note, final note here. We submit the note, and then we should see 3 notes, and 1, 2, and 3. Okay. So the issue here was that Apollo by default tries to be very clever and caches some data. So if you're doing the same query multiple times, Apollo's like, hey, hold on a moment. I've got that information already. Here you go. And so what was happening here is when we were opening this component, like if we close it and open it again, we can see that query is always executing, right? Now this is just going to be a thing that just happens in our application. This is going to try and do no cache, and we'll always be loading this data. But what we've accomplished here is really good. This thing is no longer doing a whole range of queries. Like if you look at that big meaty chapter again, the basic access control chapter, that's a huge chapter. The amount of queries that this is not doing now, look at all the things we're not doing. It's really good, and we accomplished that through what is it now, like a little bit over an hour of coding on this application. We reduced that query a lot, and I'm really happy with that. I hope this has given you a good idea of what this application does and kind of my work style. Stepping through code, I know I speak really quickly. I'm really excited about this application. I really enjoy working on it and stepping through it. What I really like about the architecture is there's a clean separation between the front end and the back end. There's a really cool kind of middle layer with GraphQL there. When we're looking at the book GraphQL object, right? This, we've still got this debug stuff here. Let's remove that. When we saw this before, like we had this, we were able to just add an extra field here and define how it's resolved, add an extra query. It's all just like this small bits of code that are all interconnected, and I really enjoy this application. Like being able to just build out this, oh look, more debug stuff. I'm gonna tidy this up when I make an actual commit too, by the way. You know what, we should probably do that sooner rather than later. Let me just finish my little spiel. This application is really nice. It's all little compartmentalized bits of code. Like we've got this notes thing here, this wrap notes thing here, and then we've got this notes component. It's all like nicely tidied up and kept together. It's really fun to work on. I'm really enjoying like the React and TypeScript marriage union in the front end land, and in the back end land I'm really enjoying Hanami and ROM and GraphQL and Sidekick and all that stuff. If you wanted to play around with the application and tinker with it, I'd be happy to lend some help if you wanted to check it out. But yeah, that's an example of just how I work through this application. Now, one final thing is we should commit our changes. So let's just do that, and then we'll wrap up for the day. So we've got, what I'm using here is an alias. GAP is an alias for, I think, get-add-p. So get-add-p allows me to add in hunks of changes. So I don't want to add that one in. I definitely do want to add that one. I do want to add those in. That was the change I made to output those SQL queries. I don't care about that. Chapter query doesn't need to do note stuff, so we can get rid of that. Chapter element no longer receives this. This seems to be a syntax change, which I'm fine with committing in this. We changed this show form and notes thing. So our element now more clearly, the variable here is now show notes, which is what this is doing, right? We're just listing notes. If there are any on a particular element, we want to see those notes as they appear. So I think show notes is a much better name for this. Elements no longer receive these notes from chapters, so yeah, we do want to get rid of that too. Same sort of thing, we're just renaming some variables. Okay, this is a bit longer, so we're toggling notes here, it's fine. show notes, notes submitted. This is simplifying this code. Element no longer handles all the like keeping track of what notes currently exist. That's all in that notes component now, which is great. That's really good that it's tidied up in that way. Toggle notes again, that's okay. Now we get to this notes component where we have this notes submitted callback to elements. That's the thing that's going to update that count. And the notes itself keeps a track of the notes that have been committed on the notes that have been added to an element. Now this is that wrap notes thing we saw before. That's seems okay. We'll do that. That's a render chapter function that didn't do anything. We'll get rid of that too. Type name, I don't think we need it in the end. We'll get rid of that. We'll just ignore those with no. And then this was the storybook where it was needing a notes, but we don't really care about that. Okay, now I'll just do a quick git status to see if we've got anything else to add. Yes, we do. We have this front end source book chapter. You know what I can do here is a command T, not command T, control T. I use a package or a application here called FZF. That's Foxtrot Zulu Foxtrot, or Fuzzy Finder. Really good thing. So I can do like just type like it's a fuzzy finder, right? So I can just type notes query if I wanted to add stuff like that, and it gives me the whole path. Is there anything else in that list? Nope. I think we're okay. So that's git status. What we'll do here is we say lazily this. So way you try and write commit messages is like this commit will lazily load notes when lazily load notes on elements. I can't think of a better commit message right now. Lazily load notes on elements seems okay for me at the moment. All right, that is everything, and we'll just push that up. Now this application, you're gonna love this. If you're an old school developer, this is like a flashback to the 1970s. Maybe not that far back, but the way I deploy this application is in two stages. I deploy the back end using Capistrano. You'll see this going up to a particular server. This is like 2009 era Rails application deployment or Ruby application deployment. It's a really cool tool. It still works the same way it always has worked, and this is just a virtual private server I'm loading it to at the moment. It's not really it's not Amazon's hipster technology. It's not even Heroku. It's just my own server. I can't use Heroku for this because it needs this application needs it needs SSH private keys added to it, so it can when that GitHub webhook comes down, the application runs a Sidekick job that then runs a git clone, and it's then going to clone down a private repository. And when you're cloning down a private repository, you either need to use HTTPS with a password. I don't feel comfortable doing that, or you need to use an SSH key, and I don't think there's another third way of doing it. So you can't really add that to Heroku. You don't really have access to a service to do that. So I've run my own server here. So Capistrano here has deployed that application. It's restarted Puma, it's restarted Sidekick on that. So the back end on the application has the latest code. Now, for the front end itself, we will do a deploy front end, and this is now going to push this code up to Amazon S3. Speaking of Amazon and hipster technologies, really the front end itself is just this it's all hosted on a static S3 bucket, but then it's what the user sees is something that's it's got CloudFront in front of it. So there's using Amazon CDN, all the JavaScript and HTML and CSS is all CDN'd across the world. So it's really close to really quick to serve up the application. I'm not going to show you the application now. I just wanted to show you the deployment of it. So that's all up there. People can start using it, and it won't be hammering my database server at the moment. Not like this application has a huge amount of users, but I just wanted to demonstrate kind of my work style. So if you like this video, let me know, and there might be some more in the future around Twist. I have some more ideas of what I'd like to do, some kind of tidying up of the code. I'm gonna go and write that test now. But thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it.